Hello and welcome to the 8th edition of Goa Arts and Literature Festival 2017. Today with us we have Mini Krishnan, who edits translations work for Oxford University Press and edits fiction, plays, travelogues, autobiographies and biographies from 16 Indian languages into English. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you have edited literary work such as travelogues, biographies, etc. from 16 different Indian languages into English. Could you tell us what motivated you to learn so many different languages?
Well, thank you for that question, Akhil. It's literally like asking me my professional biography. Why did I do translations? Well, because as soon as I joined Macmillan's, I was given a huge project called the Comparative Indian Literature, 2 volumes, thousands of pages. A chief editor, K.M. George, 16 chief editors, each for the 16 languages that were recognized at that time. And then for every language, there were about 20 contributors, so there more than 200 contributors, each talking about poetry, about drama, fiction. And then every time we were editing the portions that they sent and writing up synopses of novels, and I would ask George, why can I read this? And he'd say, oh, you can't read it. It's not available in English. Now, this went on for 5 years. It took 5 years to do the project. Macmillan's and Kerala Sahitya Academy together. It's a collaborative work. And then I thought, it's high time we did some translations. That's the original driving force. That was why I felt I had to do it. But it was extremely difficult because Macmillan's is an educational publisher, and translations had no profile at all, except what Sahitya Academy was doing. Even the major publishers were doing 1 or 2 books a year, and it was always Premchand or Tagore or something like that. Contemporary writing, modern writing was not even considered. So nobody wanted to publish. The managing director said, not with my money. I won't give you any money for this. You find the money somewhere else, so you can do it. But you can't give up on your other book. So that's how it started. The salesman said, what's translation? Is it Ramayana? So contemporary literature had no profile at all. So that's really the starting point.
So which is your most favorite language out of 16 different Indian languages, and why?
It's a very difficult question. My own language is Malayalam. And by the way, the other reason I did a project like that was I couldn't read my own language fluently. My father was a Brown Sahib who raised us to don't speak Malayalam, speak English, speak English. We didn't have a tutor at home to teach us English before we went to school, though we were not at all well off. But I loved Hindi. So Malayalam faded from my life. Hindi we studied in school, and I loved Hindi. But none of the other languages could I read. But we could understand. Tamil, of course, I picked up.
Yeah.
Kannada, I grew up in Bangalore, I knew Kannada. I couldn't read it. We studied for 3 years. They had a 3-language policy at that time. But again, they took the language away. Suddenly the policies changed. So we are all, in some sense, language orphans. I learned to read Malayalam much, much later. So I did it as much for myself as for people like myself. And the only translations we could read were some things that appeared in imprint or occasionally Illustrated Weekly. We didn't have this huge mass of publishing that you have today. Sahitya Academy books were very difficult to get. Because my father was working with a newspaper, I could read some of those books which came for review. And though they were very poor translations, there was something there that attracted me much more than English literature, which I finally took in college.
Yeah. And ma'am, you also
Oh, sorry, my favorite language.
yeah.
My favorite language is Telugu.
You have also worked in Konkani with well-known Goan writer Pundlik Naik on novel Achaib. So can you tell us how was your experience?
Oh, it was a mixed one. First of all, we are just scratching the surface. I mean, there's 16 languages when you look at the huge number of languages we have. And out of the 16, for every book that you pick up, for every writer you look at, I feel a great guilt when I publish a writer multiple times because resources are limited and there's so many writers you're leaving out, so many books you're leaving out, so many short stories. And the writers are so desperate sometimes, the translators even more desperate. What was the question? I forgot.
Okay, my question was, you have also worked in Konkani.
The Konkani, yes. So I kept thinking, we can't do just these major, highly developed and mainstream languages, which anyway have a good profile and famous writers. So I thought to myself, why not look at Konkani? At the same time, and I wanted to do Tulu and Konkani together. At the same time, Vidya Pai wrote and said this. And then I thought, yes, here's a language which is almost a fugitive language. I mean, it's written in so many. It's written in Kannada, it's written in Marathi, and of course, then in Romanized thing also they write it. Malayalam, Kannada, Marathi has Konkani, right? But where is the translation? And which experience should we look at, or should I try to promote? See, that's one of the difficulties. We publishers are so ignorant. So luckily for me, Vidya wrote to me at that time and said, will you consider this? I said, certainly, and we began working on it. But one of the problems I had was that Pundalik and his advisors knew some English. So every time Vidya and I would develop and polish and get something to a particular stage and then show it, because we always have to consult author. I don't know who it was, but someone kept interfering so much with the translation. So there I had to be a little tyrannical. I said, don't interfere so much with the translation. You leave it to us. Vidya and the resource persons of Oxford will make sure that nothing has been missed out. Polishing, you leave to Vidya and me. And finally they trusted us and left it to us.
You are a Charles Wallace awardee twice. So what was your experience when you spent some of your time in UK, and has that helped you in your career?
Well, it gave me a perspective which I didn't have here. The reason when I started the translation project in Macmillan's, which was only because a trust gave me 50 lakhs, because the Macmillan company wouldn't give that kind of money. So I found the money outside, looked for it for 7 years, and finally got it in 92. At that time, I had very good friends in the British Council. They wanted to send me for some ELT conference or something. I said, I'm not an ELT, English language teaching person at all, but if there's a literary conference, please consider me. And I also want to find out, if I were to develop these kind of scripts, what is it that a non-Indian reader would need by way of explanations and glosses? What could cross the sea? So there I was able to talk to a number of people. At the same time, Heinemann in the UK, Heinemann Publishers, had just started the, what was it called? The Asia series or something, edited by Ranjana Ash. She was a Bengali who settled in the UK, and she selected from 5 or 6 works from India and had them translated. So there was a certain interest in Indian regional writing, national Bhasha languages. It was just becoming trendy. That was 91, 92. At the same time, another great force in India was coming up. Geeta Dharmarajan had set up the Katha series. So all these things came more or less at the same time.
And can you tell us a little bit about your maybe future projects you're working on?
Future projects.
Or maybe currently you're working on
Yeah,
something.
currently, yes. I can talk about that. There's a Tamil writer named Joe de Cruz from the Fisher folk community, the Mukwan community. He's written a marvelous novel about their lives. It spans 5 or 6 decades. The title in English would be Ocean Rimmed World. That's one which has just gone up. Then there is a travelogue in Malayalam about traveling in the deserts. See, we talk so much about traveling and climbing mountains or crossing sea, but traveling in the deserts of Arabia, It was a series of essays and articles published in Malayalam, which is put together. It's translated by Matthew. Muzaffar is the writer. It's also a good photographer. So it's a terrific experience as suddenly being lost in the desert. Your jeep overturns, or the sand just covers it all up. And there are the old civilizations in the desert which nobody knows anything about. He comes across these things, he describes them, and he sees these shapes at night. And the desert sky at night is something which will bring tears to your eyes. So we were looking for a title, and he said, I see these shapes, stars, pyramids, camels. So I said, why don't we call it Camels in the Sky? So that's another project. And various other things are also in progress. A collection of Oriya short stories by Paramita, who's at this this literature festival. And what else? There is Bama's brother, who's a great ideologue, a Dalit intellectual. His essays and the seminal work he published in 92, 93, 94 called Dalit Culture, Dalit Panpada in Tamil. That's also in the press. These things happen very slowly. You can't rush these things.
You have been in this field for such a long time. So what message would you like to give to the young and aspiring writers?
Well, first of all, it gives Indian writers a chance to just be seen in public. At one time, I don't think even now, even educated people, students or professionals or extremely educated people they may not be working, but they're extremely well read. Many people who just stay home or run their own family business or something are very well read. They hardly know what the great writers of the country even look like. And because it's not really possible to function in so many languages because of time constraints, and also, you don't travel much or you don't meet that many. So then, how else but in a language which links the country, sort of glues up the country, can you see the literature of another place? So that's really, the future, the emotional bonding in India, translation is very important for this. That's why I spoke of it as the hinge of integration in my keynote address. About literature festivals, the young writers writing is a very lonely profession. You feel extremely isolated, and you're full of self-doubt. At the same time, there is something in you which says, right, you have something to say. And then, your whole culture tells you don't push yourself forward. But the writer in you knows that unless you promote yourself and unless you reach your public and unless you reach someone who knows the publisher, you can't be published. So writers are always in a conflicted sort of state. These kind of festivals give you a chance to meet not only people exactly like yourself, but people who moved a little ahead of you. Publishers may turn up at conferences, and then you watch writers, and most writers have the same difficulties coming up. So it's extremely inspiring, and also it gives you hope, and you get lots of ideas. And when I come to a festival like this and I listen to different writers or different intellectuals or artists talking, it gives me ideas for something else, a new project. I can do a series of memoirs, or maybe I can do something about artists. So it's a place where ideas just pop up, It's a fabulous situation.
Ma'am, you have been in editing field for such a long time. So what message would you like to give to the young and aspiring writers?
First of all, believe in yourself. Secondly, you have to be highly disciplined. In order to build your vocabulary, the data bank up here, read every day, read poetry every day, and read whatever language you're functioning in, read material from that language. It doesn't matter whether it's prose or biography or fiction or poetry. Read across the centuries. Read something that was written 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, yesterday, the newspapers. So all of this will build your vocabulary bank. So discipline and self-belief are the two wheels on which The writers.
Very true.
Motorcycle can, who is. That's my message.
Thank you, ma'am, for your precious time and information. That was Mini Krishnan. I'm Akhil Sawant, signing off for today. Stay tuned for more updates.